Before Princess Diana, no one was as beloved in the royal family as Elizabeth, the Queen Mum. Yet her nice reputation hid a chilling dark streak. Behind her angelic face, Elizabeth was sharp and vengeful, as even Princess Diana found out. But it wasn't just Elizabeth's bitter feuds, it was also the ugly secrets she nearly took to her grave. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon not only stood beside her husband, King George VI, but she also played a pivotal role in her daughter's reign as Queen Elizabeth II. However, before her more widely recognized years of royal duty, she lived a life filled with surprising twists and turns, much of it hidden from the public eye. Despite the diligent efforts of the palace to preserve the royal family's image, here are some revealing secrets and incidents of her less than pleasant streak. The aristocratic origins of Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon are undeniable. Born into a wealthy noble family on August 4, 1900s, she was the ninth of a remarkable 10 siblings, and she was pampered to the core. Her father was so charmed by her cherubic appearance that he insisted on her middle name being Angela. However, this angelic facade was short-lived. She once reportedly tripped only to be helped on her feet by a lady who asked, "Are you okay, dearie?" To which the little Elizabeth responded, "I'm not your dearie, that is ma'am to you." And ma'am she loved to be called. It was said she even made fun of those who could not pronounce it properly, emphasizing it rhymes with spam and not harm. Yes, she was that particular, and this would be evident throughout her life. Despite the emphasis her family placed on noble lineage over academic accomplishments, Elizabeth excelled in both areas. Her literary essays left a deep impression on her teachers and governesses, and she passed her standard exams with flying colors. But at the tender age of 14, World War I shook England, thrusting Elizabeth into a chaotic new reality. And on her birthday, Britain officially declared war on Germany, marking a grim turning point in her carefully curated upbringing. Although Elizabeth was too young to actively participate when World War I began, the conflict eventually reached her family's doorstep. 4 of her brothers served in the war, with her eldest sibling, Fergus, tragically losing his life in combat. 2 years later, another brother became a prisoner of war. Restlessly watching from the sidelines was no longer an option for Elizabeth. As World War I raged on, the Bowes-Lyon family converted their home in Gladys Castle into a makeshift hospital for wounded soldiers. Elizabeth's indomitable spirit shone through as she threw herself into this noble endeavor, earning the affection of the wounded soldiers. However, Elizabeth's allure extended far beyond her compassionate care for wounded soldiers. In the 1920s, as World War I came to a close, British royalty sought love and companionship. Prince Albert, the youngest son of King George V, crossed paths with Elizabeth for the first time since their childhood, and it was resolute in making her his own. In 1921, he proposed marriage to Elizabeth, but surprisingly, Elizabeth declined Prince Albert's proposal. One significant factor was Albert's pronounced shyness and awkwardness that Elizabeth found off-putting. Like I said, she is very particular and knew what she wanted. But beyond her suitor's conspicuous lack of matrimonial prowess, Elizabeth was unenthusiastic about embracing the royal life. She simply dreaded the responsibilities of monarchy and perceived the loss of her personal freedom. She expressed her fear of never being able to think, speak, and act as she truly believed she ought to. But as it seemed, she was just made for that life no matter how she resisted. Prince Albert, undeterred by Elizabeth's initial refusal, persisted in pursuing her despite the court's doubts about marrying a mere noble rather than a princess. When Elizabeth declined his proposal a second time, the lovesick prince even got his own mother to step in as he claimed he would not marry anyone else. Queen Mary personally met with Elizabeth. During their encounter, Elizabeth captivated the interfering queen, leading Mary to assert that she was the only girl who could make Bertie happy. What they didn't know was that it's possible that Elizabeth harbored a concealed secret. There is evidence to suggest that, concurrently with rejecting Bertie's proposals, she engaged in flirtatious interactions with the prince's aide, the dashing James Stuart. With her striking beauty and effortless charm, Elizabeth was a highly sought-after bachelorette, and was also rumored to have taken interest with another notable figure, Prince Albert's older brother, the Prince of Wales, Edward, who was said to have rejected her because of his Casanova antics and escapades. In January 1923, after nearly 2 years of courtship, Prince Albert attempted a third proposal to Elizabeth, which, to everyone's delight, she accepted. Once their engagement became public, England mourned the loss of Elizabeth's eligible status as bachelors found out she was now off the market. Following their tumultuous courtship, the couple swiftly entered into an engagement and exchanged vows just a few months later in April 1923 at Westminster Abbey. During the wedding, a deeply moving moment occurred when the bride, while passing by the tomb of the unknown warrior, unexpectedly left her bridal bouquet atop the memorial, a poignant tribute to her fallen brother, Fergus. Elizabeth assured her new title as the Duchess of York, and it didn't take long for her to captivate the hearts of the public as a beloved royal bride. But as far as her feelings for her husband, it was said that it wasn't until she welcomed their first child, Princess Elizabeth, into the world, followed by the birth of another daughter, Princess Margaret, 4 years later, that she finally fully accepted their relationship. Life could not get any better, or so she thought. On January 20th, 1936, the passing of King George V set in motion a significant change in the monarchy. The throne passed to Elizabeth's brother-in-law, Edward, who was notorious for his hedonistic lifestyle and numerous romantic escapades, and he had the trust of neither the royal family nor Elizabeth with regards to his ability to govern responsibly. In a matter of months after ascending to the throne, Edward's reign crumbled. He famously abdicated in order to marry his divorced lover, Wallis Simpson, thereby passing the crown to Elizabeth's husband, Prince Albert, who assumed the title of King George VI. And overnight, the cheerful Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon became the Queen Consort of England. Contrary to the dream some harbor of becoming queen, Elizabeth felt intense anger at these turn of events. Her strong disapproval of Wallis Simpson as an outsider was evident, and she made her sentiments known in a rather unkind manner. During Edward's brief rule, Elizabeth visited him at Balmoral Castle. When Wallis greeted her at dinner, Elizabeth snubbed her with the words, "I came to dine with the king." This treatment would extend beyond that encounter. Elizabeth disparaged Wallis Simpson in private conversations, referring to her scornfully as "that woman." She also adamantly refused to bestow upon Simpson the title Her Royal Highness, even after her marriage to Edward, and made sure everyone in the royal circle knew and would abide by it. Following her lavish ceremony, Elizabeth and King George VI described their roles as king and queen as an intolerable honor that nearly ruined their lives. In the late 1930s, the outbreak of World War II prompted Queen Elizabeth to rise admirably to the occasion, even after the death of her mother, Lady Strathmore. She and her husband, King George VI, became symbols of unwavering British resilience. Notably, she staunchly refused to send her children to safety in Canada, famously declaring, "The children won't go without me. I won't leave the king, and the king will never leave." While Queen Elizabeth became an iconic figure during these wartime years, her actions were not without controversy. During the height of the peril, when the German Luftwaffe devastated significant portions of East End London, Queen Elizabeth visited many of those affected by the bombings. In a departure for common practice, she appeared in these situations wearing bright and cheerful pastel colors, along with her finest jackets. The distressed crowds in the East End perceived the Queen as out of touch and began to regard her visits with disdain. Their resentment grew to the point that they started jeering at her and even throwing whatever they could at their monarch. Incredibly out of touch, Queen Elizabeth never quite comprehended the depth of this resentment. She believed that just as the public dressed in their best attire to see her, it was only fitting that she wore her finest clothing to meet them. Even as the Buckingham Palace, the heart of royal life, was not spared from the attacks, her thoughts turned to those suffering in the bombed areas of London. She expressed, "I'm glad we've been bombed. It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face." You know you've made a significant impact when even someone as infamous as Adolf Hitler takes notice and regards you as a threat. The Führer felt so threatened by Queen Elizabeth's popularity in England that he once referred to her as the most dangerous woman in Europe. It's almost a wonder why they went at war with each other. Elizabeth was said to have some reservations about Jews and lobbied the British government to appease Hitler, as said in books and memoirs. Despite Queen Elizabeth's remarkable contributions during World War II, she embraced a more carefree lifestyle following the war. She hosted legendary, exuberant parties at Windsor Castle, where courtiers and cabinet ministers alike partook in decidedly undignified games of sardines throughout the historic residence. Apparently, she also adored a game where Eton boys were chased by a pack of hounds for her pleasure. Queen Elizabeth, who appeared proper and prim on the surface, had a penchant for indulging in alcoholic beverages that would leave some grown men staggering. According to reports, the Queen's daily routine included a Dubonnet at noon, red wine at lunch, a port and a martini at supper, and 2 glasses of champagne during dinner. While Queen Elizabeth was at the height of her fame, her trajectory had to encounter some downward spins. In 1947, during a tour of South Africa, her typically composed demeanor cracked, revealing a less flattering aspect of her character. When a fan approached her car too hastily, she struck him forcefully on the head with her umbrella. She was known to look down on the lesser folk and would stand firm with her racism, and much like her lifestyle, rationalizing it as patriotism for the rest of her life. There have been many reports of Elizabeth despising the little people, which is classism at best. According to her equerry, she was prejudiced, always wondering why people were offering their babies up for her to kiss or mimicking the voice of a former servant who had come to visit her. Even the wife of the British ambassador to France called her rather mocking, not very kind. For one, she opposed the democratic elections in India and supported white supremacist rule in Rhodesia. More shockingly, she once walked into a reception for a Japanese prince, loudly proclaiming, nip on," to his face. I could keep on going, but it seemed like none of these known facts were looked into and most likely swept under a rug until they passed. In the early 1950s, King George VI's health took a severe downturn. He had been grappling with circulatory issues for years, and in 1951, he received a grim diagnosis of lung cancer. Although the king underwent surgery to remove part of his lung and appeared to recover, it proved to be in vain. In February 1952, he passed away, and in a single devastating blow, Elizabeth lost both her title as queen consort and her beloved husband. Overwhelmed by grief, she retreated to seclusion in Scotland, vowing never to resume public duties. It took the persuasion of none other than the Prime Minister Winston Churchill to coax the former queen out of retirement. Definitely one to hold grudges, Elizabeth held 2 individuals responsible for King George's premature death: the former King Edward and her long-standing adversary, Wallis Simpson. She was convinced that if her Bertie had not been burdened with a crown, he might have lived a long and healthy life. Ed and Wallis, by abandoning their royal roles, had, in her eyes, sealed her husband's fate. As Queen Dowager to her daughter Elizabeth II, she was no longer inclined to engage in trivial parlor games. When Edward and Wallis Simpson expressed their intention to attend King George's funeral, Elizabeth adamantly denied them entry. Yes, she refused entry to Albert's own brother at his burial. If you think that is cold, wait until you find out that she shed not a single tear at King George's funeral. After all, she also had to maintain her public image as the unwavering pillar of England. During her widowhood, the 51-year-old Elizabeth never lost sight of her significance. She insisted that her daughter, Elizabeth, bestow upon her the unprecedented title of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. This was not just to prevent confusion, but primarily because Elizabeth wanted everyone to recognize that she was still a queen, asserting her royal status. In her twilight years, Elizabeth didn't simply fade into the background. In 1998, the newspapers exposed a scandalous revelation. The elderly Queen Mother had somehow amassed an astonishing £4 million overdraft at her bank, indicating a penchant for extravagant spending. Displaying a remarkable nonchalance, the very day the article was published, the Queen Mother attended a day at the races, the very definition of unbothered. Ultimately, the Queen Mother became one of the longest-lived royals in history, And her 100th birthday in the year 2000 was a cause for celebration throughout the Commonwealth. It was also an occasion for personal celebration for the centenarian herself. Elizabeth insisted on having a generous splash of gin or two in the icing of her momentous birthday cake. I would say she definitely deserved that one. In the 1980s, the royal family went through one of the most memorable crises when Prince Charles and Princess Diana married, encountered marital issues, and eventually divorced. Yet few are aware of the Queen Mother's disquieting role in this tragic chapter. She developed an intense aversion to Diana and her scandals, once remarking, "I know she's very young, she ought to have known better." However, Elizabeth have had other undisclosed reasons for her unfavorable opinion of her new family member. At its core, the Queen Mother held a staunch opposition to everything that Diana represented as the people's princess. As a traditionalist until her final days, Elizabeth strongly believed that Diana and her associated controversies were tarnishing the monarchy's reputation. Conspiracy theories beyond Diana's death seemingly pointed to a conniving and particular monarch, mostly fueled by one of Diana's last interviews, eerily predicting her demise at the hands of the palace, is one that to this day remains unfounded. In the later years of her life, a final scandal emerged that had the potential to mar Elizabeth's otherwise impeccable legacy. In 1987, one of the most significant family secrets was brought to light. It was revealed that two of her nieces, Catherine and Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who had long been assumed and reported to be deceased, had in fact been concealed in a psychiatric hospital all along, and every single one in the royal family knew of it and did nothing. In fact, supposedly no one ever even visited to check them on their well-being and was simply forgotten as if they were dead, just like with the rest of the world. Subsequently, it was unveiled that Catherine and Nerissa were not afflicted with mental illness, but rather mental disabilities. The public swiftly and justifiably accused Elizabeth and her family of hiding them away out of shame, and then using falsified death certificates to cover their tracks. The family defended their actions by attributing the apparent notification of death to a mere administrative error, while Elizabeth disavowed any knowledge of the events entirely. These explanations left many skeptics unconvinced, and to be honest, I don't buy it either. Why did Elizabeth never correct the error? And even when the scandal broke, she was more concerned in pointing out that the madness was not from her side of the family and made sure it was duly noted. Seems rather cruel, don't you think? Or what about her nephew Timothy, the one who was reportedly a chronic alcoholic and she would nothing to do with? So much so that she never visited him. In fact, she never even attended the funeral of Timothy's wife either, who killed herself after their child died, a child who was also Elizabeth's great niece. Despite all this, most royalists had unwavering support and love for the Queen Mother. Among Elizabeth's most significant achievements was the support she provided for her husband Bertie, as he struggled with a pronounced stammer. As she stood by him throughout his speech therapy sessions with the pioneering Lionel Logue, an episode in their life later dramatized in the Oscar-winning film The King's Speech. The Queen Mother possessed the ability to captivate crowds wherever she appeared, and one particular incident stands out in the annals of history. On one occasion, during a public engagement, Elizabeth found herself in a long receiving line, shaking hands when a stray dog unexpectedly wandered into the ceremony. Without missing a beat, she cheerfully extended her hand to shake the dog's paw as well. One of Elizabeth's most unusual legacies was her habit of rarely speaking in public. As a young newlywed, she earned the moniker the Smiling Duchess for her cheerful yet silent demeanor. She maintained this image throughout her husband's reign. For Elizabeth, maintaining silence was integral to being an enduring figurehead, a strategy she referred to as being utterly oyster. Despite her extraordinarily long life, Elizabeth's final days were marked by a poignant sense of vulnerability. As her health deteriorated, she took great care to shield her aging body from public view. When she could no longer travel without a wheelchair, she insisted on using a helicopter for her trips to and from Windsor Castle, determined to prevent the public from witnessing her in a frail state. On March 30th, 2002, Elizabeth passed away in her apartments near Windsor Castle. Ever attentive to her public image, the Queen Mother's final wishes were both thoughtful and moving. Her funeral featured a wreath made of camellias from her own garden, and she specifically instructed her aides to place this arrangement once more at the tomb of the unknown warrior, mirroring the same gesture she had made on her wedding day nearly 80 years earlier. In the British royalty, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, remains a luminous figure whose legacy continues to shine. Her remarkable life was graced with dignity, resilience, and a touch of mystery. As we conclude our journey into the lesser-known secrets of the Queen Mother's life, we are reminded that beneath her regal exteriors lay a woman of depth and complexity. As her secrets are revealed, we gain a richer understanding of the person behind the crown, a woman whose life is a testament to the enduring strength of character. If you enjoy history and exploring the lesser-known facets of a historical figure's life, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more.